But this next segment will bug me a lot more, and I feel like we will both have a lot to say about it. So I guess we can mercifully move on to that.
Okay, so the next segment we cut to about 10 minutes in is the very first in-ring segment in Ring of Honor history. And before I go into this, just remember, this was a company that was sold where we had just been told by the Hit Squad multiple times that Ring of Honor was going to be the thing that let us kiss sports entertainment's ass goodbye. This was going to be pure wrestling, That's how Ring of Honor was sold as, and that's what they were largely looked as, even within those first few years. And this is how they start their first show. There's a tag team comes out, the Christopher Street Connection, which is Buffy and Mace. They were kind of they played the overly over the top, super stereotypical, effeminate kind of out gay people, and Allison Danger was their manager. And so they come out and they're wearing boas, at least one of them. They're kissing fans who want to be kissed. They put a cowboy hat on one of the security guys' heads, and the fans are having a great time. And the segment at first, it would seem kind of weird, but you're completely distracted by the fact that this is also our introduction to the short-lived original Ring of Honor commentary team of Eric Gargiulo, who was a announcer for CZW, and Steve Corino doing color. And this is this is by far the most homophobic kind of skeevy thing I've ever seen in wrestling history related to sexual orientation. And think of how much the ground that covers in wrestling.
Yeah, it's insane. It was insane. Like wrestling has been homophobic going back to the time that probably wrestling was invented. You had these, quote unquote effeminate characters, wink wink stuff about how they're gay, and certainly crowds chanting faggot was not something that was unusual in wrestling. You had people like Adrian Adonis and Adrian Street, just like different people throughout the years, and it was always a offensive portrayal. But this was so much more on the nose and so much more aggressive in its homophobia and almost violent in its hatred of what they were portraying, that it was on a level that I had never personally seen before.
I actually just as I was watching this show, I was taking notes, and I think this is one of the few times where just reading the notes before we kind of give more comments is just going to really illustrate what this is. So I just wrote basically, anytime I thought something was really offensive, I wrote it down. So this is all happening while the Christopher Street Connection is kind of just walking around ringside interacting with the crowd. Okay, first, Steve Corino is, quote, real offended, unquote, that the Christopher Street Connection are here. Gargiulo mentions the Christopher Street Connection exchanging favors and wonders if they have to do it in public. Corino says they should do it in the parking lot so we don't have to see it. All the Christopher Street Connection has done at this point in the show is put a hat on a security guard. Then, one of the Christopher Street Connection, I think it was Buffy, or maybe Mace, I always mix them up, kisses a fan in the front row. Gargiulo immediately screams, "He just kissed a fan! He just kissed a fan!" And then Corino has to add in, "And worse than that, he kissed a male fan!" Which Gargiulo replies, "That's disgusting." Then Buffy gets on the mic, and this is the first mic work in the ring in Ring of Honor history. He says that Ring of Honor doesn't want their kind there, which prompts Gargiulo and Corino to both immediately shout, "I don't," in unison pretty much. And then the interesting part is the crowd, which I think if you watch and listen to their reaction, they were kind of having a good time, just kind of with these fun, colorful characters. Because of this mic work and just because of maybe who the crowd are, they start chanting faggot. And
it was, I'm sorry to interrupt the notes, but
no problem.
It was loud, and the commentary was bad, but this was really upsetting as well.
Yeah, and we'll get into more comments in a second, but Gargiulo here then goes on to say, Like, he acts like he wants to say faggot too, but he stops himself. And then Creel kind of creepily says, like, oh, I wanted to hear you say it. And then Gargiulo's like, I think he says he can't because it's written in his contract. And to me, it's laughable that, one, indie announcers would have contracts, and two, they'd be so thought out, oh, don't say faggot. Like,
Well, also, unless like they know that Gargiulo is just like so itching to say it all the time, they had to stipulate it in his contract.
look, Eric, we know you've said it 20 times in this job interview. We're just going to put an extra clause in there. Just get a pen. We'll amend it right now. Then Buffy tells a fan who's chanting faggot, I may be gay, but you're queer. And Gargiulo's response to this is to yell, he just admitted he was gay. Like, it was like the craziest thing, or also not also obvious from the entire way they conduct themselves.
But also, he said he just admitted he was gay, and I don't think he means happy. Like, literally, like a comment of like an 11-year-old boy, like the way he reacted to this.
Yeah, like, I wrote in my thing like he was a fourth grader. Like, there's this weird mix of really kind of vulgarness and anger, but also this kind of like childlike glee, like, oh, we can't say it, and it's so crazy that the guy's even gay, but we're also angry about it. Like, it's so weird. And at this point, Buffy says Ring of Honor will be the ring of homosexuals, and he starts making out with Mace, and like full tongue. That was how far they went with the gimmick back then. And at this point, the Hit Squad runs in and attacks them. Now, before we get into the quick little Hit Squad thing, I have to say, there could be a way to do this angle that isn't horrible. I can see a kernel of the idea of, hey, we're going to show this company's not about sports entertainment, so we're going to bring out kind of the most colorful act on the indies. We're going to have them kind of hijack the show. You know, Gargiulo and Carino talk about how they're not on the sheet for the rundown. They're not supposed to be there. And then they're going to get destroyed by kind of the Hit Squad who kind of represent the company. And that'll be a visual way to show everybody that, hey, you know, Ring of Honor is not about sports entertainment. But the entire time you watch this segment, all you can focus on is Gargiulo and Carino outright, like, they're not even hinting. They're not even hinting about it. They're not even trying. You know, there's a lot of times through the years, like Gold Dust and Billy and Chuck. You've heard commentators try and skirt the line of being edgy or trying to say things, but not quite. There's nothing like that. They're literally. I mean, there's a point later on. I guess we'll just get to it. The first match in Ring of Honor history is an impromptu, about 1 minute squash of the Christopher Street connection by the Hit Squad. And then afterwards, they put Alice in Danger through a table. And when she gets put through the table, I forget if it's Gargiulo or Carino, says something like, I bet she wishes that she had managed a straight team now. Like, there's no even trying to kind of go on the line between, oh, we're going to kind of talk like we just hate them because they're colorful characters, but you know what we really mean, wink. Like, they literally say that's what you get for hanging out with gay people.
It's I don't even know like what to say. It's this, like, you know, people could say this was a different time, right? Because obviously we know this wouldn't fly even in wrestling now. I don't think, with social media being what it is. But this was 2002. This wasn't like 1981. You know, like this was unacceptable even then, to present something this aggressively angry and homophobic. And I don't know why it wasn't a bigger thing at the time. You know, I've like looked up reviews, like I'm not trying to insult anybody personally, but I've looked up reviews of this show, just things that other people have written over the years, and I don't see anyone talking about how completely disgustingly offensive this was to not only gay people, but the any person with a sense of you know, social decency and empathy, to say that, you know, we're gonna bring a couple of people out there and just shame them for their sexuality, you know, whether it's a work or a shoot, and then say that violence is justified against them because of their sexual. I mean, it's like, I'm laughing, but it's insane. It's insane how absolutely, like you said, overt they are about the homophobia. I mean, like, I know that ROH obviously didn't, the Christopher Street connection existed outside of ROH. That's why they were brought in. And I'm sure other promotions did similar stuff. But this is supposed to be the company that's about, like you said, about serious wrestling. And this was supposed to be their mission statement segment, where their mission statement is what the idea is that they are against gimmicks, which is obviously bullshit. Just if you actually watch ROH. But then they have to, like, cloud it with this creepy homophobia and this over the top announcing by Carino and Gargiulo. I you know I don't know what people were thinking. I don't know why this was okay. I don't know why this wasn't like news when it happened. To me, this came close to ruining the whole show. Like, if it wasn't for the fact that I got into ROH years later before I knew about this, probably would have turned me off to watching them at all. Honestly,
This was. Oh, sorry.
no, it's just that was how bad it was.
Yeah, this was so bad. We had to talk about it like this week before the podcast. We both had to talk to each other, just like, can you believe how bad this comes off in rewatching? And I know you were pretty down about. You were going, this was only 2002, and this was people just accepted this. Where I kind of looked at it the opposite way, which was it really bummed me out, but it does kind of show how far we've come in the sense that no wrestling company out in the world today of any significance would do this in a million years. And if they did, they would get destroyed for doing this. And people are going to say, some people listening, I'm sure, are going to be like, oh, you're too sensitive, blah, 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 you're such little snowflakes. To any of those people, I defy you to watch this segment and not tell me that by leaps and bounds it is the most homophobic thing ever done in wrestling history.
Yeah, and I'll go a step further. If someone says you're too sensitive, you're snowflakes, to reacting this way to homophobia, well, I'm not even going to say go watch it. I'm just going to say go fuck yourself. Like, yeah, seriously, like, yeah, you don't listen to our show. If that's the thing. That's how I feel about this. I'm going to call out anything that I think is offensive, racist, homophobic, misogynistic, because I don't think it's acceptable. And I think that if WWE were to purchase this tape library, and I'm not, I like leaving shows intact, they need to edit this out. This is not something that should be on the WWE network. I know WWE has had their share of terrible things, homophobic things, racist things. The other thing that they did in the past, 15 years that offends me the most, I think, is what they did with Muhammad Hassan. I think that was a completely offensive portrayal. But this should not be on a wrestling show. This is terrible in every possible way. I think it's an embarrassment to the company that they decided to start it like this. I don't know what they were thinking. I can't imagine. If I was in that crowd of people that were chanting that, I would have been extremely uncomfortable and maybe left. So I just think it's terrible.
And
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what was I going to say? Even if you remove the gay element, it's not a good segment even then, because when this segment is over, we're 20 minutes into the show and we haven't seen a real match yet. Like, this is the first show of the company, and if you bought this tape 20 minutes in, you're not happy at all. I can't see many people happy 20 minutes in.
Yeah, so they literally, their whole thing was they're trying to not be the stupidity of sports entertainment, right? They're supposed to be serious wrestling, kiss sports entertainment's ass goodbye, this is hard hitting in your face, blah, 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 blah. They literally had a segment in which they presented the literal worst of pro wrestling to start their show. The worst of pro wrestling. The worst.
Went further than WWE ever did in terms of being directly, like, WWE has skirted, xenophobia, homophobia, race, relations, all sorts of things. But they always, they're smart enough to walk the line. This went so far over the line and just became so direct. It really did feel like you were listening to, like, almost an audio hate crime.
Yeah, it's exactly what it was. And beyond that, this was right around the time that Billy and Chuck were starting in WWF. They'd shown up like a month or so earlier, um, and that was bad too. I'm not defending that. That was really bad. That was homophobic, but it was they gave themselves some degree of plausible deniability, or at least implausible deniability. There's no deniability here at all. I know we're a broken record on this, but
Yeah.
it was so offensive to my sensibilities, and it sounds like yours too, that
Yeah, I
it's
know
hard for me to get over it.
we're going in circles a bit, but people have to understand, like, this kind of, like, vaguely traumatized us, I think, watching this. I think we both forgot how horrible this was.
Right, I remember how bad. I remember the segment being bad. I remember when I first watched it in like maybe '05, because I didn't, like I said, people didn't talk about this when it happened. They talked about the main event. They did not talk about this, so I didn't know about it until probably 2005 when I got the DVD, or the tape, I should say, and I thought it was pretty fucking bad then. But I hadn't watched it since then because I didn't want to, and just like you said, the commentary, like noticing that more, makes me realize just how over the top disgusting it was. So it turned me off, but it just like it put me in a negative mood to start the show,
Yeah,
and that's not what you want.
and I think the other thing is, we both kind of talked about how, ROH was ECW inspired, but they didn't try and be ECW. I feel like in some ways this is the most ECW Ring of Honor ever was, where it had that feeling of we were trying just so hard to shock you, but we're kind of being almost like fourth grader about it. And, we put a woman through a table, and we just have brash guys yelling about, how you're here for fucking ROH, rah, rah. Like, it felt very different than what the company would quickly establish itself as being, yet it's the first impression they gave.
Yep, exactly. And I will say, just as an aside, so this was also like probably the way they wanted to build up the Hit Squad, as being like maybe their Dudley Boys or whatever they wanted them to be. Never really quite materialized, but they were Mafia, who is Dan Moff, and Monster Mac. And they, like I said, they didn't last that long as a tag team, but Moff ended up getting into better shape and became a pretty big part of the first 3 years or so of ROH, which maybe wouldn't have expected from watching this segment.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's enough about that. Although, again, I think it's crazy to think the first match in Ring of Honor history is the Hit Squad beating the Christopher Street Connection. And it's also, they cut another Raw Ring of Honor promo, which we've already seen them do 2 of them to different groups of fans. So that's the third one in 20 minutes. Just a horrible way to start the show. But then